So I'm just going to cry for the whole thing. So it's okay. That was pretty fun. Exactly. It is 9:30 a.m. I was looking down, know what that means. Welcome to Mboned. Joined with Pim. Agenda will follow this one. Stig would normally take his place next to me, but he's busy working on his slides for Pim. I, however, am well prepared. So let's start by getting the blues around. And I think we're signing these for both working groups. Is that how we do this, Joel?
Yes.
Sign both, or we just sign it and it goes in.
You can do.
No, look at it. There's a pin and there's
Right. You should do the emblem and then you should do.
So we have a blue sheet, singular. It'll be blue sheeted later for Pim.
This caused confusion last time when they decided you had the pen, and I had to convince them that you had it. In fact.
Right. Okay. So we had.
Try to write one along the pin methods on both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it looks like we've got two blue sheets. We got a Pim blue sheet and Mboned blue sheet. So this one will rotate first. Sign and move on. So note well. Looks like the dated one. I think we're okay. Well noted. Nods. I saw eye contact, which means it's time to ask for a note taker. Right? You weren't looking at your laptop, going to hide from you. Who's willing to take minutes for us today? It's not that tough. Keeps you engaged. It's incredibly helpful for all of us. Keep me from having to listen to the audio recording and transcribe horrible mistakes. Wow, you're my hero. I had a volunteer. I didn't have to get angry and play like, elementary school principal games. That's great. We have a note taker.
And I'll do Jabber.
Please mail them to chairs at Mboned. All right. Excellent.
I can do Jabber.
And we got a Jabber champ. What's happening? This is a special day.
We'll use the emblem channel for both of them.
Okay, I don't the need to go one.
Yep, that's right. Okay. That's the emblem one.
What? He's just doing Mboned, you said? And then we have the separate.
No, we're using the same channel for both of them because it's associated with the stream and being.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
And the same
more
big box.
rules that come from joint meetings. Right?
Yeah. Well, we're learning and we're getting better. And we're well led. Thank you, Joel. Here's the agenda. Can you please eyeball this agenda, throw things at it, call me names, anything missing, anything misstated, nods, approval? All right, I'd say we go on. So let's start with some status. We have this Mboned V2, it's been around for a bit. That rev number is not a mistype, it's 16 up now. And the question is this really working group last call ready? Who here has read the latest rev? I see 2 people, 3 people. All right. Who's read any of the previous incarnations and followed this a little bit? We got some older incarnations. All right. So I assume that if you've done that, you at least know the direction it's taking. The question is it fully wrap up what we've agreed to in the working group or not? So please read and review. It's hard to take a note to the room whether we think we're ready for last call when only 2 of us have read it. So I think I will do that on the list and then we'll go from there. Sound reasonable? Nods? Tomatoes? Thank you. Now we have the interdomain peering BCP. Let's hope this is last call. But honestly, the feedback's been beneficial, I think. We got some other operators involved. We cleaned some things up. I think it's been focused a bit. It seems kind of, lengthy process to go through last call so many times, but that's kind of the nature of, I think, an ops document, because we don't always have good ops representation here. And when we reach out and get them in, it's the first time they saw the doc and it's like starting over again. But I think it's a good representation of all the issues been brought up, and Percy will update us on that. Questions? Other docs. We have a Yang model for multicast we presented today, and we've got, an info model Guess I didn't catch there were two drafts there. My mistake. So, Sandy, you aware of the previous one? The ACG draft?
So that's the,
How did I miss this?
Tim Chan. So that was the one we discussed at the last IETF about the main thrust of it was pushing use of SSM.
Right. It was,
So
right,
I've
so-
discussed it with Lenny, who's a co-author, and so is Mikhail down at the front there, and we're going to rev it very soon and make the thrust of it use SSM.
I was thinking Yang, so I was
Yeah.
derailed. So here's a good case of an overused word, right?
Yes.
Because it's basically service models is what we called them previously. All right, versus Yang models. All right. So our first item on the list is Holland. Stay inside the pink square.
All right. Hi, I'm Jake Holland, and I'm presenting a congestion control problem in multicast. So first, consider multicast utopia. What we have here is a bunch of services transmitting, I'm thinking video, but I think it applies equally well to files. You have a higher bandwidth version and a higher bandwidth expansion and a lower bandwidth base rate video. And if you can receive both of them, then you get a higher quality experience. And if you can only receive some of them because you're sharing with other flows, then you get a lower quality, but you still get something. And when there's too many different things being viewed, then everybody gets a lower quality because they're all sharing fairly. And this is the world we want to live in. This is sort of I want to operate some multicast video services like this. The reason I'm here is because I ran into trouble trying to figure out how to do this safely. So we have some multicast congestion control protocols that can accomplish this. But let me get into the problems. So the next slide.
This is Greg. Just wearing a hat here. When you said we have congestion control protocols, are you actually meaning control plane on the wire, or are you talking about just service layers that are done, at the application side?
Service layers. So there's WebRC and there's Norm. There's several sort of earlier versions and research papers that are about the algorithms to perform congestion control.
Good. I just wanted to make sure we weren't talking wire. I'm like, no. So it's more like unicast ABR would be. It's all application layer.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
But WebRC does have some aspects of what it does on the wire, I think. But it's
Sure,
not
but just measuring what MRTT.
right. Yeah. Okay. So Greg is striking at kind of the core issue here is that there's nothing that's controlling it in the network. So the problem here is that if you have any receivers that aren't participating honestly, then it's nothing sort of keeps the network from being overflowed. So there's two different recommended strategies in the current best practices or the upcoming best practices, I guess, for multicast congestion control. There's receiver-based and feedback-based, and there's a few examples of each. But both of them have the same problem, which is that when the sender is sending, it's non-responsive to any receivers that are not feeding back, essentially, which for receiver-based is all of them, and for feedback-based is all of them that are not sending back any feedback. So next slide illustrates the issue. I reproduced this in lab with a simpler setup, but the core issue is that our multicast utopia is disrupted by one bad actor or a small set of bad actors who are joined to disjoint sets of flows. The amount that you can muster to sort of disrupt the network that you're a part of is, the total capacity is all of the multicast channels on the internet, essentially. And so this is a clear problem, right? I don't need to explain this, or okay. So next slide. The suggested solution. There's a draft in Transport about circuit breakers, which is close to becoming a best practice. So the circuit breaker strategy, and this is just a section from that draft. The idea is that you have an ingress that maintains a meter of how much bandwidth there is. You have an egress that also watches the meter, and when they are mismatched, then you trigger the circuit breaker, and that tells you to cut off the flow of traffic. And they also define examples for unicast, and they're structured a little differently because you have to cut it off at the ingress. But in multicast, then you want to cut it off at the egress so that you're not disrupting any other receivers that are on a shared path as well, where maybe they are able to receive it. So if you can imagine, like, the second router down has other receivers subscribed to it, then you wouldn't want to disrupt them. Okay, so next slide.
Just another question, Greg.
Yeah.
So is the leave message granular enough to just select like temporal and spatial layers and not the base layer? I mean, you just say shut things down, you're saying back things off.
Right. So for circuit breakers, it is a shut things down. This is a prune the channel. And it's not really specified which specific channels that you prune is part of the circuit breaker draft. It's just any channel which is not responding to congestion. So the idea is that, if you can prove that there is congestion in the network and that there are flows that are not responsive to it, then you start cutting them off. And this is potentially disruptive, of course, to, depending which flows you cut off.
Exactly. That's what I thought. Something more granular, you can actually maintain your service and alleviate the problem at the same time.
Right. So if everybody is participating in congestion control, then yes, you get, then they solve this problem before this comes up. So the circuit breaker draft talks about how this should be treated as an abnormal situation, but when any receiver can attack the network, then this is something that will come up, we can expect, unless we have a good solution.
And how do you envision the meter being deployed? Is that on a router? Is it on a host? Is it in the?
Yeah, next slide. So actually the one after, we'll come back to this one, I guess. So in response to your question, we'll skip ahead one more. Okay, so the draft that I've put up is an attempt to specify this example circuit breaker, essentially. So, I'm really here looking for feedback, volunteers, assistance, sort of selling the idea that we need this to transport guys, participation in maybe testing it or working out implementations. But really this is an attempt to get around the problem that's going to keep me from scaling up thousands of video channels. Our current plan is to just only do 5 or something until we can solve this problem, essentially. But the idea is that we're going to send bandwidth advertisements on the sending side, and the routers along the path are going to notice the bandwidth advertisements. And then they will know that this flow has an expected bandwidth of, however many kilobits per second, and then detect that their links are oversubscribed. And they'll either cut off an oversubscribed downstream link by just not blocking the traffic, or if all of the downstream links are oversubscribed, or if the upstream link is oversubscribed, then you would prune and cut off the traffic in that direction. If you read it, then thank you, and I'm sorry it's a little bit early work. I hope it wasn't too hard to follow, but I think that there's a few ideas that I've already had from discussions around here, and I'm looking for, you know, better improvements. I think that there's a you know, a notion that Greg's question was speaking to, maybe about prioritizing. So the way the draft is stated, it only asks you to cut off according to bandwidth. And if you do have available, there's a PIM extension, an experimental PIM RXC, PIM extension RFC, which exposes the population count. So you can have, so the routers can have knowledge of how many receivers are downstream. When you have that information, then the draft specifies that you should cut off the one with the worst bandwidth over number of receivers first. And if you don't have that information, then you assume essentially that the receivers, that they all have the same number of receivers unless there's administrative configuration.
Just a second. So that would actually address that issue without having service awareness. Just the fact that like the base layer is going to have the highest population.
Right, right.
And
Yeah.
layers are fewer. Okay.
So whenever the base layer has the highest population, that works very well. Yeah. There might be some use cases where I'm not sure it works for every use cases, but for every use case, but yeah.
Might be something out there. Dino?
Are you done with the presentation? Are you ready for questions or not?
Sure. Let's take questions. I really just wanted to make the case. I think we need this to be standard because we need it to be interdomain. That was the prior slide that I skipped over to get ahead of this question. Yeah. So it's just make the point that the different domains need to interoperate, and so and you can't rely on the receiver to behave. That's the core problem here. So anything that's like going to be only on the receiver side just isn't going to solve this problem. It needs to be part of the network. And because the different domains need to interoperate, it needs to go down the standards track and become, you know, something that solves this problem. I actually am not very attached to my solution. If you have a better solution, then please publish it and save me a lot of work.
Can I ask an embarrassing question?
Yeah.
Was this found with a misbehaving application or a misbehaving operator?
Neither. Just I was, you know, we were doing a review of the proposal to. So we thought that AMT was sort of our last big chicken and egg problem.
Sure.
And you know, we put up an AMT relay, and we're trying to talk, you know, ISPs into now we can have organic growth, right? So ISPs start receiving, and we can send traffic to them. And we're reviewing sort of, you know, the plan, and discovered that you know, this was raised as an issue, and it's the one that I could not solve no matter how hard I work at it. You know, this is it's more theory. It hasn't come up, but I did reproduce it in lab with the Mad Flute. You know, yeah.
Okay, questions?
So I want to try to decompose the problem into little smaller, simpler problems. And let's say case one, we have lots of gateways connecting through the same replicator, AMT replicator. I'm assuming all the questions and the whole scenario is solely based on AMT, which is really important because when you have head-end replication, you could cut off a individual receiver. So in that case where there's multiple gateways connecting to one AMT replicator, and let's say we're in steady state, life is good, the available bandwidth and the streams are behaving correctly. Now this new guy joins that puts you over or puts you to 90%, whatever your threshold is that you're only willing to support. That's a good time in that this very simple case, just to admission control, not allow him to join, and you can cut him off in the single replicator.
So
So maybe a policy is in general, I don't know, I want to now move to the next multi-replicator case, but in the general case, if you just, maybe the general policy is last guy who arrived can't come in because everything was fine. It's like somebody coming in here and starting to scream and disrupt. You take that one guy out, you don't take the first guy who showed up, right?
Possibly. So this is a detail. So let me first back up and disagree with the claim that it's just about AMT. So I think that this problem exists even for native connection of multicast.
That's
right?
harder. That's why I started with AMT.
Right. So
Because if you cut off a branch, you're cutting off a lot, which may solve your problem, but then it's a DOS attack of a larger region of receivers, right? And that was what I think you were worried about, Chuck.
right. So our current strategy is that the AMT relay will have a bandwidth cap on how many are going to go over a specific tunnel, and then we'll have you know, more sources on on other relays, and you would open up a new a new tunnel for those, and then each of these would sort of have potential for this problem, right? But you know, it really still, to me, boils down to inside the operator's network. It's, I mean, our you know, partner's network who's receiving this stuff, right? If they try and, you know, if we get competitors, right, and they open up other channels and they're less responsible about how many channels they're going to have, then, you know,
Channels
maybe,
meaning a different S, G altogether is what you
Yeah,
mean. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That's the hardest of all problems because you can't correlate between the different set of channels. And so
Right.
you have to look at this raw sort of metering sort of thing,
right.
which means everybody can get it. It's a DOS attack waiting. It's a DOS attack waiting to happen, but fixing it. So we walked over together from the hotel and we were talking about this. So he gave me all the preliminary stuff that I could ask intelligent questions rather than stupid questions.
Oh, don't hold back.
But I have a feeling that, and you know, looking at the Mirai attack that we had a few weeks ago, if we try to do anything proactive, I think we, the operators, or we, the protocol designers, are going to cause the denial of service more so because we're pruning back so much that we're so scared that there's all this available bandwidth where we went too much the other way. So
Well,
that's the only thing I'm worried about, right? Now, of course, you want to protect your network, and maybe half your capacity is better than zero capacity. But I'm just wondering if we'll swing the other way. So we have to be careful about the solutions.
Yeah,
Obviously, right?
So the draft does mention some of the security concerns, and you know, that is one of them. If you sign up for something, then you can, it still constitutes a DOS, right? And that's part of why the PIM extension is ideal if we can get it, you know, because that sort of also solves your latest arrival problem. That's the one that, you know, only has one receiver, and if it's small enough, then maybe it would sort of be better to pick him.
So maybe the question asking you as a network operator or someone who deploys this is, if you see you're at 75 to 80% capacity for 1,000 groups, and now there's a DOS attacker that joins 100 of them and starts putting you over capacity, that's a simple case because you noticed a certain state and everything looks good, and one event happened to multiple S, Gs.
Well,
What do? Do you pick one S, G versus the other because it's paying more money or it has better quality of service, or what do you do to decide which one you're going to allow to degrade if you can't prevent it?
these are reasonable things to consider in an extension. I think it's a good question. You know, as written, it was just the highest bandwidth sort of loses out first, or the highest bandwidth over receiver account. So I think that just taking the latest is maybe a little problematic. Like when the Super Bowl starts, then you have, you know, a bunch of new joiners, right?
Because there's too much
Right.
dynamic
So
behavior.
I mean, and maybe that's a special case, right? Administrative control might be the answer to that one, but you know, maybe when something goes viral, then maybe it's also can be a new thing. So it's interesting question. Please participate on the mailing list. Give me some ideas. Thank you.
Hold on, Tim. We got a question online.
Online.
Torlis.
Hi, yeah, Thomas Eckert. So vendors do have multiple proprietary ways to block multicast traffic egress at replication points. And maybe as a suggestion, kind of, we can kind of figure out what those solutions are and see if there is an interest to define in the IETF some recommended functionality. All the ones available, well, except for one, I think, are based on local configuration. And I would, suggest that if an operator has an interest to get this blocking done, then he'll certainly, would like to be able to do that even without the application traffic signaling something. So application traffic signaling was always a big pain in the IETF with the network, right? So there are the last 5 years of pain in that. So maybe break up the problem in these two pieces, trying to figure out what is it that you want routers to be able to do blocking wise in terms of policies. Like, is it really only the biggest flow that needs to get dropped, or do flows have an assigned priority, that type of stuff? And then basically separately from that, what's the optional best signaling way to minimize configuration for the operator? That would be high level my suggestion. And then to get back to what Dino was saying, I actually think that AMT may be more difficult because the way on how you would do the blocking stuff, it's really hard to identify the point where the congestion happens. So you'll have a hard time doing it there. On the other hand, AMT makes it a lot easier for the folks interested to do something to get it done, meaning on the AMT relay, you could implement something and not wait for some access service providers to do it.
So Torlis, this is Greg. You've alluded twice now to something, and specifically, I assume you're talking things like IGMP join limits, IGMP join rate limits. Is that what you're thinking about?
No, actually, I was thinking about things like, in Cisco iOS, there is a thing called multicast limit. There basically in iOS, there is a feature to actually block multicast flows. In iOS XR, there is a feature on the ASR 9K to do it. I know there is something similar to that in Junos that I read up 3 years ago. So not about signaling stuff, but something that the router locally does, really blocking outgoing copies when he sees an overload or assumes an overload on the outgoing interface.
So just an architectural observation, if you're trying to prevent you from going over the threshold, it seems like further out in the network is the right way to do it, stopping more joins, but you don't have the administrative control to do that. Dina was saying at the relay you do, right? Now you've got basically the service offerer and the policy are there combined in one place to do it. So I disagree with her. I think it would be easier at the relay than it would be at the edge of the networks. Now it may be simpler in terms of config and the best way to do it at the edge, but you don't have access to every last hop router to put that config in place.
So on the relay, you can, exactly, it's easier to block flows, but you would like to figure out which of these flows are competing with each other at a congestion point, and that's a lot harder to figure out because that congestion point may be downstream, somewhere in the middle of the network.
Okay, next question to Mike.
Yeah, well, just speaking to the last point, I'd also like to mention that you can have multiple different relays, and they would not be able to or multiple different sources of traffic from, and maybe not all from the same source services, right? You can have, this is the case where, yes, we convince a partner that multicast is wonderful. They sign up, they put up a gateway, and they accept traffic from us, and then they also talk somebody else into, spinning up a multicast service there. And so they have another, a route to another different relay that has another different set of sources, and they accept multicast traffic from there. And so the relays don't have access to any information that there may be. I think that's
right.
What Tarlis was saying.
Sure. But in that case, the gateway does. It's almost there's at the edge, right? The decide to send the join.
They may not be the same gateways either necessarily, so that it can be a join point downstream from that.
Oh, okay.
So,
Dual homes gateway is within the same enterprise.
or just multiple different gateways in the same
Behind
enterprise.
the same
and
downstream link.
yeah, with shared downstream links. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the hard part. I was looking at the case where if there was two relays and just one gateway joined to one and was rejected because that guy exceeded his bandwidth. So now you start sending the discovers again and you hit a new relay, and that new relay says, I have the capacity to do it, so I'll be able to support you. That's the goodness of it. So the problem with Anycast is that I can't deal with it, you deal with it. He says he can't deal with it, he deals with it. He keeps pushing it off until the Anycast goes nowhere. And that means that then what happened is any new receivers for other S, Gs, now you have to constantly re-inject and withdraw these Anycast addresses to put you out of service. This is going to be the interesting thing. So maybe the way you deploy this is that an S, G is assigned to a single replicator, unfortunately, even though the distance between the source and the relay may have multiple, relays off of it. Maybe just assign it to one, because then you'll have more control. Each relay can support a specific S, G, multiple ones of it.
Well,
Would
so
that be too
the way it
restrictive?
is now, you have each relay can support a single S, and we have broken it down to that point.
Oh, that's
But if you join multiple groups for the same S,
that's okay, long as those
Right,
come into
right.
the same relay, you can admission control.
Yeah,
those.
yeah.
So I think that's simpler.
so the only problem being that it doesn't solve this problem. You still have even if they have multiple gateways receiving from multiple different relays, then there can be congestion downstream of that that can be attacked by a single bad receiver. Yeah.
Tin Chan. So is this intended to be deployed within a single administrative domain? Oh, it's completely open.
So right. So the idea here is to make it a standard. So as specified, it's an IP option, and the routers would pick it up in sort of the way that.
So there's an IP router alert thing.
Yeah,
going
it's
on there,
essentially another
which is a DOS attack
router
in
alert.
itself. So
Sorry.
potentially a DOS attack in itself.
Yeah, and that also is addressed in the security concerns section. I'm not totally sure it's adequate, but yes, I talk about I link it to the router alert option and potential attacks against that. So, and it's specified two ways in the draft. Actually, it's specified as a UDP packet with the router alert option, but I prefer the IP header option. I specified it the two ways because the draft on best practices for making a building block for reliable multicast, which this is a congestion control building block for multicast, is the way I've addressed it. But that asks that you specify it first as a UDP format, but I don't think it's really suitable because it has to be a router alert. So I think it is more appropriate as an IP header option. But yes, the idea is that any router along the path which has implemented this capability to be a CBAC circuit breaker now can make independent local decisions based on the traffic that's passing through it, right? So you get these bandwidth advertisements as part of your data path, and there are problems with this, right? You have to notice this bandwidth advertisement as part of the data path instead of just routing it, and then treat it accordingly.
And then presumably it's using the same method. Are you integrating this then with the one in transport area, the circuit breaker activity there? So you would.
Well, there's not a
more generic traffic control,
yeah,
whether it's UDP,
so,
unicast, or multicast.
The transport area circuit breaker is a general class of devices or systems. So this is trying to be an implementation of one of those that you can standardize across domains.
Okay, all right.
And then any routers that participate, then they're going to be receiving and noticing these things. Any that don't, just forward it, and it's no different for them. And they don't get the the benefits, or it's just a little bit of 8 bytes of overhead every once in a while.
I think it would be more palatable if you started off saying it's only going to be deployed in one domain, but the reality is that
that doesn't solve the problem, unfortunately. We're trying to we only control one of those domains, so.
Yeah. Okay, another remote question, Torles?
Yeah, it would be good to detail a little bit more what type of test results have made you to conclude that there is this work needed when you have a really good layered multicast receiver application like the ones using the methods that the IETF standardized, and then that companies like Octoshape or so are using, right? So that's basically something that really comes very close to how ABR works, and that is implicitly a circuit breaker, right? I mean, all these multi-layered receivers are going to exactly leave the higher bitrate multicast channels when they see the loss, right, and go down to the lowest possible. And then, of course, we can argue whether, for the lowest possible, you should also simply leave when you experience it more than, I don't know, 1 or 2% loss, right? So I think this layered multicast is an implicit circuit breaker mechanism long before that term circuit breaker became hip in the unicast world.
Yeah, and that works very well as long as the receivers are well behaved. So I did set this up and try it in lab just to convince myself assure myself I'm not fooling myself into seeing a problem that doesn't exist. So the way I set it up is there's a mad flute implementation that implements flute, and they have RCL, I think, is the rate controller they have, which is an adaptive. It does exactly that. When there's loss, then the receivers will leave, and so you put a bandwidth limit on it, and indeed, the receiver leaves the channels that it doesn't want to join. If you then add a receiver to the network, and that receiver just does like I did it with iPerf-SSM. So you just tell iPerf-SSM to listen on this SG, and it won't receive any packets that it understands, but it still joins the group, and so it still gets the traffic through, and that causes loss on the other channels that are being received due to congestion in the limited bandwidth. That's the only test I've run really, and it was just a proof of concept. And I wasn't entirely satisfied with it because the MAD FCL build didn't actually reconstruct the files, so I'm not sure that everything was working properly. But it was indeed, not joining all of the flows, and then when you separately join flows through that shared bottleneck, then it was causing loss. Yeah.
So you're saying that you have validated that the good receivers are behaving as we would expect, but the bad ones might need a circuit breaker. So I think then the question is there enough justification to say that we need to add work for circuit breakers in the IETF because they're still important?
Yeah, so I would hope to get consensus on that point here to, get some agreement that this is an important problem and that it needs more attention than it's received. And I think, yeah, we need to do something to solve it. And if we ever want to have, interdomain multicast, as far as I can tell.
Jeffrey Dong from Juniper. To follow up on what Torres was saying earlier, indeed, we already have something that to block the traffic flow when we notice we don't have enough bandwidth. That currently does not tie into the signaling yet. For example, after you block the flow, we still send the join upstream. That further work could be done there. For example, you use some other ways out of band to let the receivers know that what the desired bandwidth this flow should be, and you can tag the information in the PIM joins, the PIM attributes, indicating the amount of bandwidth this may be desired, and then each router along the way can make a decision whether to admit that flow or not.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that was actually my first idea, was to add this to IGMP in some way, so that you discover, instead of discovering out of band just an SG, out of band you discover a SBG, where B is the bandwidth, and then and then PIM would propagate that along also, and the routers would refuse it. I think it might not be a terrible idea. I did run into some problems with what happens then if one receiver issues it with a 1 meg bandwidth and another different receiver issues the same SG with a 3 meg bandwidth. I mean, you have the same source, and so you have the same reverse path, and I'm not sure what that means and how you. So I thought that this was simpler, but it might be another idea worth exploring.
Yeah, we can follow up offline.
Thank you.
Okay, just one more, Dino. We're pushing this
Final
along.
comment.
know.
I don't see how you can solve this with PIM all the way because it's multi-domain. I think you have to use an overlay of some sort where AMT is a flavor of that, because if you do these things with IGMP joins and PIM joins, you're going to take out a lot of people that have already been listening to the feed and everything was good, and all of a sudden one bad actor comes along and knocks them out. You got to knock out the bad actor, and if you can explicitly identify the bad actor and he's the only one who doesn't get the feed because he's being malicious or he just went over capacity, an overlay is going to be the only way you could do this. If it was all inside your domain at your edges, you could solve it with native multicast, but you have sources in too many places, gateways in too many places, and relays in too many places. So I think an overlay is going to be the only way, no pun intended.
No one believes you. All right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Hershey.
Was that last year, just a FYI? Was that last year? No request.
Let's just follow along the agenda. Can we do that?
I think it's interesting.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it. Stay inside the pink square. It's right there. I see you.
Okay.
Your every motion is being recorded.
Okay. All right. Okay. So we have the peering point, interdomain peering point, best current practice draft. These are the comments and responses from last call number 5. Next slide, please.
Last call.
All right. So in the previous last call, There were plenty of clarifications based on some technical inputs. Lots of people made comments. I'd like to acknowledge them. Hitoshi, Tim, Lenny, Michael, Jake, all of them had a lot of very useful comments. Plenty of changes made. There were several comments about manifest file, which we ended up essentially saying, all right, let's just remove that. There were plenty of comments on how to limit the scope to SSM only. We've done a lot of that. Then Jake Holland had a comment on the authentication location needs to be done at the application layer independent of 82, so we did that. And there were lots of questions as to which references need to be put where. We again made a lot of changes on that. The draft number 5, version number 5 was uploaded September 30th. Last call 5 was initiated October 28th. And I guess that ended over the weekend.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so last call 5. So far, we got a bunch of comments from Hitoshi. I forgot to change reference the RFC correct numbers in section 2. This is the draft. The wrong ones have been shown with the strike through. The correct ones are the ones in red. That was the change in section 2. Next slide. Comment 2 from Michael. Emphasize that SSM is scope only in the abstract. So the red text is the new text added in the abstract. SSM only for a specified set of deployment scenarios. That's the abstract. Next slide, comment 3 again from Michael. Try and make it very strong in section 2 that ASM is not there. So again, the red text is the new text. Setup of interdomain peering for ASM is out of scope. Next slide. Again from Michael. Some of the stuff that is not in the document, Michael basically said, let's just add a new paragraph to say that it's not there. The primary purpose of this document is to describe a scenario where two ADs interconnect via direct connection to each other. Security and operational aspects for exchange traffic on a public internet exchange point with a large shared broadcast domain between many operators is not in scope for this document. Okay, so that's the new paragraph added there. Next slide. Again from Michael, there were a bunch of minor nits, so we removed the phrase other from wherever it was. And there were several periods where I either had periods or no commas and periods, whatever. I've made as many changes as I possibly could. Next slide. A draft of all these changes has been on the mailing list. Response from Michael and Hitoshi is that all the changes that they requested, they're okay with it. So where do we stand?
Well, so all these changes are reflected in the current published draft then. Look at that.
No, I haven't uploaded the final.
Oh, here we go. So that's what we need to do. We need to upload the latest rev, we do the last call on the latest rev, and hopefully we'll all be singing Kumbaya and holding hands.
One more last call?
The last call. Last.
Can we emphasize that?
Well, yes.
Well, there'll be an IETF last call.
You're right.
yeah.
You're right. That's the last working group last call. Any other questions? Thank you, everybody, for helping and contribute to this thing. And it's really, I think, tightening it up for the benefit of the whole community. Please, yeah, get it up there, kick me on the list, and after this week, I'll send a last call announce out.
Thank you.
And I got thumbs up from the AD, so I did the right thing by some measure. All right, and one more. Let's see. The right one. Oh, Linda, welcome. Stay inside the pink box.
I sent you an updated one.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Uh,
Can you open it?
Let me see if I can find it. Hold on a second. It says we have updated presentation, so bear with me. Let the get online and find it. There we go. Let's see. That's the other one. This would be the new one who's got free.
Let me see the next slide. Next. Yes, this is the new one.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're on the right one. Okay, good. All right, go ahead. Oh, I have to plug it back in. Sorry. You guys wanted to watch the slides too? Gosh, so selfish.
We are, you are.
That almost brought out the worst in me. I'm sorry. You are. You are. It's not funny anymore. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, morning everyone. Yeah, I'm Linda. This is my presentation about multicast information model. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, at the very beginning, this draft is named as multicast service YAM, but after discussion during the Argentina meeting, we tried to redefine this draft as multicast information model and propose this one. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, this slide trying to emphasize why introduce multicast information model. You can see here, there are many existing multicast YAM models such as PIM, IGMP, and BEER, and so on. And all these models try to describe different technologies for multicast, and they are distributed as separate file and focus on the protocol itself. And they constant on high level to describe a high level multicast service. So this draft try to stand at a high level to take advantages of these models to control the multicast network, to implement multicast service. Okay, next slide, please. This slide try to emphasize what is multicast information model. You can see here, this model is mainly used by the management tools run by the network operators in order to manage, monitor, and debug the network resources used to deliver multicast service, as well as gathering some data from the network. And for this purpose, here we try to provide a human readability of the whole multicast network. And specifically, we try to frame different components and correlate them through UML class diagram. You can see in the next slide, okay? And based on this UML class diagram, you can initiate these classes through TimeL encoding or YAM model as you like. And as a result of that, I think you can stand on high level or high level to take full advantage of these existing multicast YAM models. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, here is a class diagram about this draft. You can see here on the top level, it is a big multicast class, and it includes 3 parts: multicast overlay, multicast transport, and multicast underlay. And you can see in the multicast overlay, there has an overlay type. It has overlay type attributes, and it also contains the multicast information and multicast nodes information. And in the multicast information, you can see the group address, source address, and VPN information. And as in the multicast nodes information, you can see the egress nodes and ingress nodes. As for how you express these nodes, you can use IP address, or you can use IP address and BFR ID and something like that. And the second part is multicast transport. It has transport type attribute, and based on this, you can invoke PIM transport or BEER transport or Cisco mode transport or multicast or MPRS transport. This is all the existing YAM model. You can invoke this YAM model. And the third part is the multicast underlay part, and it has underlay type attributes, and based on this, you can invoke BGP underlay, ISIS underlay, or SPF underlay, or PIM underlay. Also, this is also the existing young models. You can invoke them. This is the overview. Okay, next slide. This is the young model. It is written according to the previous diagram, and you can see here 3 parts: overlay, transport, underlay. And next slide, please. And this is the young model for the overlay information. And next slide, please. And this is a detail for the transport layer information. And next slide, please. And this is some information for the underlay layer. Yes, next slide. Okay, that's all.
Oh, I thought he was going to get questions. I was going to accept this, talk to the mic. Anyone have a chance to read this? Hands, we got a couple of readers, good. All right, feedback.
I apologize if this is a dumb question. I have, I'm sorry, this is Jake Holland. Yeah. Is there a sort of standard process for testing a Yang model, or is there like list the use cases and demonstrate that this successfully configures it, or was anything like that done?
Yeah, we've got a Yang doctor has to be compiled. There's some sort of architecture overlay here, but this is a good point to bring up here, because some of the questions that came back is, why was this needed, right? But I think there's a lot of unique characteristics of multicast services that would warrant something like this. That's my feeling, but some good feedback from the rest of the operators would be interesting. So who here is directly tied into the IETF processes and Yang doctors, and anyone? Do we have anyone here representing a larger footprint of Yang at Cisco? Or Cisco, shoot, oops, IETF. I looked up and recognized a colleague, so I spilled over.
Yeah, we have been doing some of the Yang documents. So yeah, follow the process. I think I was mentioned. We have our internal review within the working group, and we also have that reviewed by Yang doctors. And would be good if anyone can have some implementation, so that's also helpful. So
okay.
Once we have all checked, and the ADs, especially Mboned, the OPS ADs, he will personally check the scope and dependencies and see if we can go ahead to move forward.
So are you actively engaged then with the Yang experts here? That's the next step.
I'll contact you later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. You guys make
contact. So in PIM working group, we have a design team that from different vendors that have been working on Yang models for PIM and IGMP and MSDP and so on.
Excellent.
And it could be useful to at least email them and say please have a look at this and just see if it sort of makes sense from a.
Do you have a particular distribution list you use? Just
yeah, we have a mailing list
the experts
for
okay.
the design team.
Could you connect that with Linda?
Sure. I think she's part of the
perfect.
team on the mailing list too.
Good.
So.
Thank you.
I want to say about this that I think it's useful to have a model like this, like a service model or information model, because they are like models for the different technologies, and you can in a way get the information you need. But it's very complicated when you have different underlays and overlays and various things, to actually get this information in a good way. And it may not be possible to get all information actually with existing models. So I think this is useful. What I'm missing a bit in the draft is it talks about the model, but it doesn't have that much text. And it's a little bit hard for me to understand how you actually would use the model in different scenarios. So I think it would be good to have a little bit more explanation and maybe some examples, so how this model would be used in some concrete cases.
It's good feedback. Thanks, Stig.
Okay, I'll add some explanations. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Everyone tail glued to the chair for Pim. Pim's next. What? Pardon me?
You're back to stop.
Was I? Yes, I'm about to start Pim. Thanks, Linda.
Tim Chan. So just a quick comment. Looking at the status pages for Mboned, we have 2 active current drafts, at least the ones that show up there. Plus, I think there's a new one we saw today. The milestones are a little bit out of date. One of them says submit mtrace version 2 to IESG January 2014 or something. So should we have a bit of a navel gaze in terms of where we're going and what we're doing? I mean, there's potentially stuff that's coming up that's operational. People are bringing stuff in.
Before I agree, but before we run forward in the interest of time, this is a 2-hour slot, correct? 2.5-hour slot? How full is the PIM agenda?
Yeah, it's 1.5 hours to go.
Yeah, but how full is the PIM? Okay, good. So the easiest.
I don't know. I just thought I'd make.
No, I
make a
appreciate
comment.
that. We're here, right? I think the easiest thing to do is just rev milestones. And that's something that the chairs need to take on a regular basis anyway. So I appreciate the kick to the head. I need that on occasion.
Well,
Thank you.
It's not what it's meant to be. I think the chart is great. I'm just wondering.
Okay.
We do seem to be moving along a little bit. Maybe.
Who's fresh off of remembering what the charter currently lists? Anyone here? I remember the charter harassment we went through last time was quite extensive, but I think we've got it netted up fairly well to be operational focused with gaps, right?
Yeah, I mean, that could be interesting stuff like once beer starts getting deployed, we'll have operational stuff with beer maybe in here.
True.
Stuff like that. So I think there's things coming up, but it's just.
We have no intention of starting Beard D.
Beard D. I think you have to do that now you've suggested it.
That was last night. Beard.
That's pretty.
Yes, it is.
It's terrible.
But thanks for bringing it up. Well, we could throw that on the list and start some discussion there in broader form. We'll update the milestones. And now that you said right in front of Joel, I'm on the hook. Thank you. All right. Any other Mboned business? Comments? Colorful expletives? No. All right. Now, if I can only find a PIM working group chair, we can roll this over. I'm done. I've had enough of me. You don't get my dongle. You don't get my power supply. It's just sorry. Yeah, it's just going to go downhill. Let's just stop right now.
I'll do the slides. Yeah, let's do that. It's the same blue sheet.
No, we've got two blue
doing a
sheets,
different
two
one.
separate blue sheets entirely.
And Dave, can you keep going?
And just one more
Thank
time.
you very much.
Everyone signed the Mboned blue sheet? Got one more to go? All right, Jay. And just for clarification, last time we had one blue sheet and we tried to call them both Mboned and PIM, and very many people signed one or the other. They got split. It was confusing.
Yeah, so
We have two separate blue sheets. Mboned one just went around. Now the PIM one's.
yes, let me, just in case some people are confused. So basically, 2 different working groups meeting in the same slot, and Mboned just finished, and this is the PIM meeting starting now. And I'm sorry, but yeah, you have to sign blue sheets a second time.
Do you want your computer too?
So there's really less of a joint meeting, you just share.
That's right. It's the same crowd, and we decided that it would, several IETFs ago,
That's correct.
that's Greg's computer, yeah.
I'll just move it away a little bit. So we had like minute takers and so on for Mboned, and are you guys willing to continue doing it for PIM? I know, yeah, I'll help you with the notes when you are presenting. So, yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
Okay.
Oh, it's not that way. You need to plug in when you have them.
It was working a second ago. Yeah, it's just working.
Oh, it's coming.
Is it going now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll help take a few notes to if there's anything.
Shoot, I can't see my screen, but that's all right.
Mm.
All right, same note well as before with Mboned. You should all be aware of that. If not, please look at it now and in the posted slides online. Here's our agenda. Please don't let the heavy emphasis on Yang deter you from staying. Some of you may not be too interested in Yang. Exactly, I know. But Yang is the way forward right now. We do have some really good work that's been going on. So hang in there. We do have a couple non-Yang related drafts that we would appreciate your comments on. So anyway, this is the way it is. Active drafts. We're going to be hearing about some of these today. What do you think, Stig? Is there anything that we need to talk about here?
Well, okay. So the DR improvement draft, there's been some discussion on the mailing list, which is great, and I'm hoping more people can read it and join in and comment on the list. Oh, it's here. Put it.
Oh.
Otherwise, yeah, I guess we're pretty much ready with the PIM Yang draft. It went to last call, and there were some comments, and the draft has been updated based on those. I guess we'll have a presentation soon. I'll present the BSR, well, the source discovery draft, and we got a couple of drafts that are kind of hanging in there, but not sure what's happening. I guess that's on the next slide. And as you can see, we got two RFCs fairly recently, which is great. There's some progress. Did we have another slide?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any questions about our existing documents? If not, Shufeng, if you can come on up and present. And I should have your slides here. I can't see my slides, but I'm going to, is this you?
Yeah.
We good?
Good morning. I'm Xufeng Liu, reporting the status of the PIM Yang model draft on behalf of the authors and contributors. So for this draft, we went through the working group last call, and we got the reviewed and got it reviewed and have had a lot of comments, and we addressed those comments mostly, and we updated the document with the revision 03. We also have that model reviewed by Yang Doctor. We got the review comments probably a week before the IETF meeting. So we looked through them, and there are some comments, but no major issues. So we'll go over those later on. And so we'll update the document after the meeting so that we have those addressed. Next slide, please. So during the review process, some of the comments are still being discussed here. So they are not major issues, but we will close that pretty soon. And one thing is about how do we define the PFD configurations in our model. The way we are doing here is that actually we apply the PFD YAM model, use their groupings here applied to the interface. So if you want to have PFD enabled, we set the enable flag. And there are two groupings in the PFD model. One is with this extended parameters. So you can also specify the multipliers and some intervals. So another version would be simply we only do the enable, disable, and leave the parameters to the PFD centralized model to manage that. So just wondering if we have opinions here, so which way we want to go. If we have strong opinion one way or the other, we can take that into consideration. Otherwise, so we'll check with the PFD people, see how do we want to proceed.
Jake Holland. Once again, I don't feel like I understand the use case that's enabled or disabled by having this or not. So that's I would like to help review this and comment intelligently, but I don't feel like I have the information. And I'm not sure if this is documented somewhere that I just haven't discovered yet, because there's a lot out there. But is there a way that this should be a part of it? A part of the draft, I mean, that explains how these options participate in enabling certain use cases in the network?
You mean in general why we want to have BFD, or is particular options?
So BFD in particular, I'm not. I don't particularly understand. I mean, I didn't see a reference that pointed it out, and maybe I didn't look closely enough.
Yeah, that's
but it's a more general question as well for all the options. I think that it's a frequent enough occurrence.
The BFD is the mechanism I think every implementation currently is using that to put on the interface, so that when you set up the PIM, go ahead.
No, sorry, Michael Abrahamson. So generally, I've got the notion in Yang that I don't know what the correct word is, but you import other parts into here. So I would say there should be a BFD model that you should then reference in here. So yes. I don't know if you are defining this here. Right?
No, actually all those are coming from BFD model.
Okay, so this is just that you are using this as part of this.
But the question is how we use them.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So the thing that one argument that BFD is a mechanism you set up between the pair of the interfaces, right? Yep. So you periodically send the hello to your neighbor, and you monitor the status of the connection.
Yep.
So if anything wrong, then you get notification.
Yep.
So you know you cannot send anything go there.
Yeah. So I mean, anything that the BFD model can configure would then be configurable as soon as you reference this, right?
Right.
So the question here, should BFD configuration have a protocol intervals? Does that mean that you want to change the BFD model then?
Yeah, there's two kind of implementation, right? So One way is that you have a centralized controlled sessions, PFD sessions, you between one peer to another. So you each other, you set a session, then you have periodically hellos, and you monitor those messages. And that's one way to do that. Another way would be per protocol. You may have your own intervals to set up. So depending on implementation, I think Cisco and Huawei can do this kind of extra parameters per protocol level intervals and the multipliers. But Juniper cannot do that. They don't have this.
So that would be up to the each implementation what it actually presents here, right?
Right.
So the question is, yes, the answer to this question should probably yes, it should be possible, depending on the implementation.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I think that would be the answer here, because this would be like optional.
So optional, yeah, that's one way to do that. Make it optional and feature, so the implementation will decide to use that or not use that.
Yeah, it's just I'm not sure why I went up here, because I could talk over there. But, anyway, but I think we should look at maybe like, models for like OSPF or whatever too, and see how they did it with BFD. I don't know. Because, I mean, each routing protocol or whatever would have more or less the same parameters, right? And yeah, I'm not sure exactly if it belongs in this model or in the BFD model.
Right. Since you mentioned OSPF and ISS, they also had an argument about how should they do this. And the current version of that OSPF model is they only put the enable disable flag there. They didn't want to go too further to all the other attributes. Actually, this is also a debate happening in the BFD working group currently. I don't think they have resolved that. The two group of people each has the different opinions, but both implementation there.
Okay, Michael here again. So I think this should be solved by the people creating the BFD model. So I think we're in agreement on that one, right?
Right.
So we go to BFD and make sure that their model supports having per protocol.
Yeah, I checked with Jeff, and so make sure he give us whatever they preferred. Next slide. Oh, go ahead.
I'm Liu Yisong. I'm with Xu Feng in the multicast YAM model team. So I think the BFD configure, every protocol has own config. Like between the two devices, OSPF can build peers, and PIM can build neighbors. And it's interval or other attributes in BFD can different, but they can share a single BFD session. So I think the protocol should have its own BFD config.
So that's the reasoning for the one side of the implementation, because of the same pair of interfaces, right? So you can put OSPF on that and also PIM on that. So they want to control independently. They may not want to share the attribute. But on the other hand, the other group people are thinking you can centralize, manage with the different sessions for different things. They don't want to have each protocol dealing with this. So I heard it's still going on in BFD. So we can have the option here, but also we may also want to just follow whatever BFD people they decided to do. Actually, even if we only have the enabled flag, so if vendor really wants to do the extra attributes, they can always do the augmentation. So that's another option. Okay, thanks. So another comments will be, how do we model the timer? So currently we have the timer value, and we put those two special values there. One is for infinity, saying that the timer is infinitely big, and also so that basically no timer here. And so we have the comments, but we don't have. This is currently we have in the model, and we discussed that during our design meeting. I think even the with the comment, it's not strongly opinionated one way or the other. And actually, I brought this into the Yang architecture design team, and they seem to be okay with this style. So even put into the common Yang types. So if we don't have strong objections, maybe just go ahead to do this way.
Yeah, yeah, I guess that, yeah, this is Sting. I guess that was my comment. Yeah, I'm sort of okay with it. I guess my comment was more or less like, it doesn't quite make sense to say that if you have something measuring, how many seconds since an event or something like that, it doesn't quite make sense to say like no expiry, right? Or infinity sort of doesn't make sense either, but I guess you could kind of say it has some meaning. But I don't care that much. It just looked a little bit odd to me, kind of.
Yeah.
So Eric Gray, Erickson. The usual philosophy, as I understand it, is that if you allow the value of 0, you have to give it some special meaning, because clearly you don't want it to have been expired already. So either you declare it as no expiry or infinity, or you don't allow it.
Right. Right. Yeah. So use a special value is kind of not ideal. So make it.
Yeah, just to clarify, so I was thinking, if you have something like counting down, like an expiry time, then it makes sense that, no expiry means it will never expire and so on. But if you have something that measuring, like counting up, kind of like how many seconds since something, then no, that was the one I was kind of.
Right. Another thing would be this actually is a value range, right? So if it's showing the value, we don't have to show this. So it's a system won't show anything, no expiring, and always give you some kind of value. It's just a range set kind of thing. So probably no harm to leave them there. Okay, next slide. So we got that reviewed by Young Doctor, and those are the general comments. So seeing that the structure is okay, and it is aligned with the IETF net model, the routing config. That model actually is current, just a few days ago, published at the IFC 8022, and so our model is trying to be used for different vendors. So each vendor, they can have different kind of mappings. So any components they can implement and map to that model. They are okay with the approach, and they have some comments, ask us to clear some terminologies, and they also ask us to put better descriptions in some areas. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I think we have a comment on Meet Echo.
Oh, the red button.
Oh, okay, that's scary.
Okay, go ahead, Torles. Sorry about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the question about the parameters that belong into the BFD Yang model versus the PIM BFD model, and I'm not aware that there is any definition of per protocol timers with BFD. At least I haven't seen that in any of the implementations around at all. And I think it's fairly logical to figure out whether something should be in the BFD Yang model or in the protocol specific model, right? If there is a way to configure it per protocol, put it in that model. Otherwise, put it in the shared model. So if you have any example implementation or so, I mean, there's even a independent specification, right, for PIM-BFD, or is there?
Yes, there is. Right, that's a comment here. So there's actually already some implementations doing protocols. So that's why we put it there, because we already heard the implementation actually doing this.
There is no reference to a document in your draft though. So let me find it.
Right. So because when we talk about that, we had the discussion during our design meetings where we checked multiple vendors, including Ericsson, Cisco, Juniper, Huawei, and we checked different people from different companies. And for these particular options, I think Huawei have the implementation for the BFD parameters at the protocol level, and also happens on some platforms on Cisco's routers. And others, they don't have such kind of option. So in a general approach, we were trying to accommodate the different kind of implementations, right? So if it's everyone doing the same thing, we put at the mandatory configuration. If some implemented that, some don't, we put that as feature. And if only one particular vendor is doing this, so we just take it out and leave that to the vendor documentation.
Yeah, sorry, I just don't understand. I mean, wasn't BFD always sending protocol independent packets in terms of that the frequency of them? I mean, otherwise you'd have to send BFD packets on a per protocol basis, right? Some with a higher frequency, others with less frequency, or sorry, it's.
We can have the whoever do the implementation explain that, but my understanding is that they have a same session, and after you got the connectivity checking, and then once you receive that, based on the protocol, whoever enable that, they will multiplexing that, and to each protocols handle that differently.
I think we can move on.
Yeah.
It seems like that's the comment was that these same discussions have been happening in the BFD working group. Is that what
Yes.
the comment was?
Yes.
So, yeah.
We check with them. And also the dependencies, right? So currently, this is a BFD model, actually is one of our dependencies. They are working on that to solve the, because BFD model, they also have dependence on other models. And so we need to have them to be stable enough so that we can move forward. So they are working on that. So we check on that. Once that model is stable, then all the other dependencies seems okay. So none of them will be blocking. So so we can move forward.
Yeah, so we had one last call and we got some comments there. I was hoping to maybe get more input, but at least we have a bunch of vendors working together and agreeing on this, so that's good. But yeah, we probably need one more last call when we have sorted out these things, and it would be great if more vendors and operators could look at this and make sure that it fits their implementation, and also that as an operator that you have the information that you need in the model.
Next slide, please. So we have another model. This is for IGMP and MRD. So this model is also working group document. The model itself is kind of stable. So recently we updated the model based on the changes from some other models we depend on. So now we are aligned with the latest models, including the IETF routing and some other models. So we passed the validation and we updated the model. So it's ready for young doctors review, and probably we also want to have the working group review it more extensively. Same kind of dependency. So device model and schema mount, they can proceed independently, and we also use BFD here, so we need to check on them. The policy model we're trying to remove from our model so that we don't have to depend on that. That's because of the progress on that model is unclear. Other than that, we can proceed to the young doctors review and working group last call.
So is that the typical path where you have the young doctors review first before we do our working group last call?
I think it can do either way. So
either way.
But we need to do both, right? So
what have other working groups been doing?
Right.
Have other working groups been waiting for the young doctors review before they do the working group last call?
I think both
ways?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Typically, you request it, like if you want it to happen at a specific time, you just ask.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
So, are you saying that this is close where we could,
Yeah,
we're at a
I
point
think-
now where we could issue
Yeah,
working
we should
group
be
last
able
call?
to have that review.
Okay. And these ones are tough, as Stig alluded to. We probably don't expect many comments on the list just because of the nature of Yang, particularly in PIM. It's hard enough to get comments just on non-Yang related drafts. So we're going to proceed with, even if we don't get comments. That's not the norm, but in this case, we probably will. But we do ask for people who have any interest to support these guys. Any comments about that? Does that sound good? All right. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, Stig, I think you're up.
Okay.
I gotta find it though, because I can't see my jack.
I think that's right.
Is it one of these?
No, it's none of those.
How about one of these? Is it one of these?
No,
No?
none of
Okay.
those.
Maybe I don't have it.
It's on the well, it's on the web page. So I uploaded it.
Shoot, do you have it on your laptop right now?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I can use.
I don't know if I ever got it.
Do you have the? Can you go to the web page now? And just meeting materials. Yeah, this online.
Where is that?
Go to meetings. Materials. That one.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay.
I have a hard time with this. There we go. Yeah, we're good. No. Hold on. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, my screen's frozen.
Yeah.
Do you have yours up?
Yeah, I can.
Why don't you fire it up and I'll have to reboot. Go,
Let me see.
this screen thing's
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah, do that. Do you need this?
Yeah.
The dongle?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have to look at that. I have a hard time. Never.
Okay. So let's see.
You good?
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Okay.
Okay.
Can you?
Yep.
control
Got it.
then?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to talk about this source discovery draft. I've been presenting this a few times before, and one thing I know confuses some people is that it says BSR in the draft title. That's because the very first version kind of relied on BSR in some way. Should maybe have changed that, but anyway. Next slide, please. So I'll do this quickly because I talked about it before. But basically, we have a mechanism where we want to distribute information about active sources in a PIM domain. So it's like a new PIM message type that contains active sources. So it looks a bit like BSR. So a first-up router would send periodic messages with its active sources. And if there's like a new active source, you also trigger a message. And basically, routers in the domain maintain state about what the active sources are. You don't need all routers to do it, but you need to do it if you potentially will have receivers. And the main idea with this is to have something that can work in like ad hoc networks and networks where it's kind of hard to have like a rendezvous point that is always reachable and so on. And it's basically using shortest path trees for the forwarding. It looks a little bit like SSM, except the source discovery is done in the network. Next slide, please. So there's an implementation of this already that has been tested. And there's several people that want to deploy this stuff. But yeah, I just put it up here for reference. If you haven't seen this before, look at the draft and look at the slides and please give me comments. I think most of you are familiar with it. Next slide, please. I got some comments from Dino. I asked him if he could help review the draft, and he actually pointed out that we could simplify the message format a bit. The way I did it initially is that I had first there's like the PIM message type, which would be a new PIM message. But then I had like this sub-message type because I would like to allow this mechanism to be used for other things in the future if there's other information we need to distribute within a domain. And the idea is that if routers support the general mechanism, then they can actually forward data in the future if we come up with some new uses for this without having to know each single message type. But there's already a TLV format. Okay, I know this is slightly confusing. So basically the one with the red cross there, that's the part I took out. But you see below here, we have like TLVs. So if you want to have some different uses in the future, we just use some new TLVs. We don't really need the sub-message type. And in addition to the sub-message type, I also had this flag or bit called U up there, which basically is a bit like the transitive join attributes. It basically says, what should you do if you see an unknown message type? Should you forward it or should you not do it? Because there could be cases where you just want to distribute everything without modifications and then it's fine. If you want to use this just for like one hop, or you expect routers to somehow do some kind of modifications or something to the information, then you may not want routers that don't support it to just forward it. But anyway, what I did in this new version instead of that bit is that a TLV in the high order bit is set in a type. That means that it should be forwarded if you don't, even if you don't know what the type is, you'll just forward it if that bit is set. That's the main change to the new version. Otherwise, it's just some clarifications, some improvements to the text, make it a bit more readable. I still would like more people to review this though, so it would be great if any of you would have a look at the draft and give me some feedback. Do I have one more slide? Sure. All right, okay. So yeah, there's a prototype that has been tested and some interest, and I did revise the draft, and I feel the next step is I still have, I know, a little bit more text I should clarify or expand based on the comments I got. But I also would like more reviews because I don't feel that many people have read the draft or at least not commented on it yet. Yeah, that's what I had. Any comments?
Kind of an idiot process comment. Eric Gray, Erickson. This slide set is not on the site right now. Is that right?
Oh, it is on the website. It's a web page. I mean, it has been uploaded. It's just that he didn't have it on his laptop.
Okay, it's not on the agenda on the website either. So
Yeah, it takes an hour for the agenda to rerun.
But I don't know why it's not there though, because I posted the slides last week, and it hasn't been converted to PDF, so it kind of lists the PDFs, and then there's like a PowerPoint kind of by itself.
Stuck in the production pipeline.
Yeah. I know when I looked at it myself, I was like, oh, where is my presentation? But I think you should see it, right? I saw it this morning. But yeah, we should look into that, and it could be a tools issue, or maybe something weird with my PowerPoint format. I don't know.
We're good?
Yeah. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. So my laptop's kind of screwed now. So
Okay, I'll do it.
you'll do it. Okay, good. Either that or they can bring up their own. But if you can just pull up their thing off the, that'd be great.
Actually, what's going on with my laptop? No, it's just I don't know. The resolution is kind of different, so it's
Oh yeah, yeah.
kind of
Because you're
squashed.
connected. Yeah.
It's okay. But let me see.
Yeah, you're up.
Okay, so let me see if I can find this stuff. Yeah, so you see here that like the materials are here, but yeah, some of mine is the only one that is in PowerPoint still. Okay, that's actually the wrong draft, wrong slides. It's this one. Oh. Let's see this.
Morning, everyone. I'm Sunny Zhang from ZTE. It's a presentation for MSDP Young.
Yeah, I was just trying to see if I could make this into like presentation mode, but
Right, in the browser. That's a good question.
I guess we'll go like this. I hope people can read it. Okay, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Next.
Okay.
This Young model is based on the preliminary consensus in the Young multicast design team. And you can find the Young model information from this way, such as mailing list, wiki, and GitHub. This Young model is according to RC 13618, and its scope covers MSDP protocol and commonly used configuration. The draft defines a Young data model for MSDP Young configuration and operation. What we have done is high-level structure, configuration attributes, operational state attributes, statistics attributes, RPC attributes. And maybe in the future, we will add some notifications in it. Next. That's the second presentation for the draft. And in the new version of this draft, according to Torres' suggestion in the Berlin meeting, we add the source active limit feature in global and peer configuration. And we add a detailed explanation in all the sections. And we think it will make the draft easy to understand. It's MSDP configuration. This part in the configuration include two parts. One is global and the other is peers. And we add the source active limit in the globe structure. And the other feature of the global is not changed from the from last version. Next. And also in peer configuration, we add a source active limit in it. And the other feature of the peer configuration is not changed from last version. Next. Thank you. It's the MSDP state. Because the global state, peer state, source active cache state is the same with the previous version. So the contents of the structure is not changed since last version. And the state include global peers and the source active cache 3 parts. You can see the feature of the source active cache in this page. Next. And it's the peer state. Peer state includes 2 parts. One is the same as the configuration, and the other is detailed peer information, such as session state and the timer information and the statistics. And it's MSDP RPC. We define 2 RPC for the MSDP protocol. One is clear peer and the other is clear source active cache. Any comments?
This is Stig. So this work has been done together with the design team, as I understand it, right? So it's basically based on implementations by several vendors.
May I call for working group adoption?
So how many people have read this draft? Can you raise your hand if you read it? Okay, no one?
No.
Yeah, I wish we had more people that have read it, but given that the design team has been working on this, there's people from, I don't know, handful of vendors that probably
Cisco, Juniper, MetaSwitch, and the other.
What do you think, Mike?
We'll have to ask him the list, but
it
seems like you've done due diligence in getting people involved.
Yeah, I was gonna say we often have trouble getting enough interest, but I know there's people from 5 vendors or something that are interested and have participated in the draft, so that's pretty good. So take it to the list. Yeah.
We'll ask next week.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dave.
Let's see. I'll try to
It's our
download
last
this
presentation for the day.
slide.
And on a very high note.
Okay, I think I should be able to. No, wait. Let's see. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, okay, I'll keep this brief. This is an update on a draft that I've presented more than a few times here, and have also presented in ISIS, Spring, and OSPF, because we had corresponding drafts that illustrated some of the protocol changes. Next slide, please. Very quickly, what we're talking about, for those of you who have not read it, is an architecture that suggests we could really take advantage of unicast tunnels in Spring as a component of multicast tree construction. The notion being that if we fully compute the tree from the information that's available in the IGP, then we can figure out where the actual points are where packets would need to be replicated, and we could simply set up Spring tunnels between them, taking advantage of the existing unicast connectivity. What this requires is some extra TLVs to be added to the IGP in order to convey that sort of membership information so that it was universally available. And the approach is fairly compute intensive, although with the state of modern compute, being able to get some good convergence times even in a 1,000-node network starts looking like it was fairly tractable. The draft itself describes the terminology, the overall approach, how you would do loose or specified multicast distribution trees pretty much to any level of granularity. The actual algorithm itself and the FIB installation procedures as to how you would do it. Next chart, please. So since the last IETF, simply updated the draft to provide a couple of further clarifications in terms of how the algorithm works. And this was actually a result of sort of doing a full audit of what we had actually built in the process of generating a rather detailed companion tutorial that's been available for a couple of months now for public review that goes into it, or that explains in quite a bit of detail how exactly the algorithm works. Final chart, please. So at this point, I figure it's all out there. Everybody's had plenty of time to look at it, and I think there's been sufficient information made available that people can form opinions as to what they would like to do with this, whether you would like it to go away or whether you think this stuff should progress. So we're seeking working group adoption. Are there any questions? Well, I guess that was clear enough.
Okay. So, how many people have read this version or any versions of the drafts? So there's, okay, like 3 people, 4 people. I don't know. Yeah, that's good. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the draft. We presented this in Spring as well. I guess there's been some.
It has been presented in Spring. I didn't ask for time on this agenda.
Yeah, but did you get some input from Spring on the solution or how they feel about it? Or
not specifically. It was basically because it was multicast. It was more punted over to here.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really, other than the IGP extensions, it doesn't really change anything in Spring because it uses the existing data plane. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's multicast, and it might make more sense to do it here. My main concern is, we don't know as much about segment routing as they do, kind of. So.
And they seem to think that you guys knew a whole lot more about multicast, and this is where it belongs.
So, yeah, so I don't know. I feel like we probably need to discuss a bit with the Spring chairs about it too, but yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what to do.
I agree. I think that they're going to
now,
probably tell us that it's up to us based upon when I was talking to other people before, but
that's been my operating theory based on the feedback.
So Stig and I will commit to talk to them, and if they're in agreement that this is work that they would recommend having done here, then we will poll the group. Maybe we should poll the group now while everybody's here. So who in this room feels that this, actually, let's take a comment first.
Yeah, so there's a lot I don't know about the segment routing. But I did do a quick search and found that there's not a mention of congestion. Is that something that should be a part of this draft, or is this like just out of scope?
We've not put any cycles into congestion in this. What it does have is the notion that if you could strictly specify it, then in theory you could engineer it, but that would be like an offline computation. To do
Thank
that.
you. Oh, and sorry, I'm Jake Holland. I
Yeah.
forgot my name there.
Okay, so okay, other comments.
Should kind of take some notes, but actually I'll disconnect this and then I'll take some notes.
Hey, can I make another comment? So Ice from Cisco. So I think, so we discussed it a couple of times already, right? And I think this is just another protocol to build trees. And I don't think there's actually much in common with segment routing to begin with. So I think the first question I think the working group needs to answer is there a need for another tree building protocol? And if we want to work on that, I think that's the main question to answer.
Yeah, you're correct. It could equally apply to MPLS LDP if there was a portion of the label space set aside that could be administered by how the multicast was set up. So all the thing needs is a pre-existing mesh of unicast connectivity the way it works.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask this question. Those who have read this draft, and I guess those who have not read the draft either, do you think this type of work is work that we should be working on in the PIM working group? Raise your hand if you think it is. Thank you.
I'm confused with the question.
The question is if this type of spring work, as presented here by Dave, is something that should be worked on here in the PIM working group.
That's not the same question as ICE.
No, it's not.
That's the clarification.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, Eric Gray, Erickson again. So this question is a general question. I've looked at your working group charter, and it's very, very restrictive. And so the question kind of turns into, are we willing to recharter for this? I think it's work we should do, but that's a different question. And I don't know how the working group chairs feel about that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if we would need to recharter. That's a good comment though, because this is the protocols for IP multicast. So, yeah, that's a good point. We need to look at that again and update it if we need to.
Yeah, I mean, we have a fairly open charter, but not entirely sure if it's covered either.
We'll have to discuss that with tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, see me in the back here.
I'm with routing AD. Sorry, I walked up late. I had something else to do. What I would say is first decide, whether you really want to adopt this and do this work, and then we can worry about the charter. So don't hold the discussion based on the charter. Decide whether the working group wants to do this. If you do, then we can worry about it. If not, then we don't.
Okay. Yeah. So again, we'll take it to list, but I guess I need to ask the rest of that question is if there's anybody in this room who feels that we should not be working on this type of work in this working group, raise your hand. So we have 5. Okay. Noted. Thank you.
How many people were?
1, 4, and 5 against.
Okay.
Okay.
That seems comparatively conclusive.
It does. Yeah. But it still deserves it. Yeah.
It's still great though if more people read the draft and other people might have other opinions.
Yeah, I'm presuming this is still going to the list once you guys.
It is.
have
So
your
we'll go to
draft.
list. Any comments online? Because we're getting ready to end this meeting. Torres, Miguel, Wentao.
I'm just wondering if any operators want to deploy this and why. What are their problem statements? That would be good to hear.
No, I don't have feedback on that front.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay.
I think we're good.
So I'll send you my notes and you can just append this.
We will.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
So
Thank you, guys.
the question you wanted was not just to do this kind of work. Or was it adoption?
Do you think this type of work shall be adopted.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah. Not this.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
You just return them.
Same as always. Yeah.
Oh, okay, you got another set here, but that's it.
Oh, yeah. Hmm. Did we screw it up?
Sure. So,
So we're all right. This is Kim and this is Mboned.
Okay.
So we're good.
Okay. I didn't realize we got.
We just have 2 extra. Yeah. So we'll just leave these. These can be thrown away.
Yeah. Yes. This was returned to the secretary.
Oh yeah. Oh, I should sign this. I haven't. Do we need to sign?
I think it's sort of secret here. I don't know.
We need to.
Yours right up there.
Did you sign or no?
No.
I'm going to just to do it. I'm going to put you in there to pad our numbers. All right, thank you. Thanks a lot. Do you know Windows very well?
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I'm just trying to what's crashing. Skype is trying to start when I'm rebooting. I'm trying to prevent
it from starting.
From automatically starting.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you go. I don't know where you go in Windows to where the startup application is.
Yeah.
I can't remember where it is. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Good to see you.
I was wondering, by the way, I know there wasn't much input, but we should try to follow up and see.
Yeah, because I thought that the chapter clearly says that we want to have enough GMP and MLB loss and so on. So I was wondering what would be the logical next step.
Yeah. Okay, very cool. Good. Yeah, excellent. Nice to meet you. So you based in Asia? Okay, I'm actually going there tomorrow. Yeah, they'd be meeting with John. Anyway, good to see you. Do you know standards? Are you in the standards team? Like, what team are you in?
So I know I said I would do it before. I should at least send an email to the risk and say,
right, okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure. I have encountered some people like in system say,
so what, Yale folks, I think his name is. He's in standards.
So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that guy.
It's a reasonable solution.
Okay, I understand. Okay, good. Nice. So you know Windows very good? You know Windows very good? Okay. I'm having a problem and I can't figure it out.
Just update it.
Do you know Windows very well? Do you know Windows very well? I'm just trying to, my computer keeps crashing because Skype's trying to start it. So I'm trying to get to wherever those files are that automatically start and your programs and your I'm trying to remove that, but I can't figure it out. But there's got to be an easy way to do it. I start a yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what it is right now.
But yeah, expression message stuff.
It works. I think that's exactly what I'm doing. Exactly.
Yeah, I was involved in the beginning, but I haven't, joined the meetings for a long time now. But it's great because you guys.
Because it's like now I'm on the
how's it going?
I was wondering more about this.